Salutations, Imperial citizens and Battle Brothers. I am Brother Tobias, and this is my little review for the Warhammer 40k June 2024 rules changes. I will go over every document and try to point out as many changes as I can. I'm sure I will miss a few or will explain something not quite thoroughly, but I will do my best to get everything out there. And I will be looking at this from the perspective of Space Marines and the Ultramarines. So I will not be talking about any Adeptus Mechanicus changes in any particular detail because it doesn't affect the Space Marines directly. So without further ado, let's get started. Welcome to the first part of the Warhammer 40k dataslate. So right here we have the dataslate itself. Let's see what we can do about that. Let's keep the zoom like this. All right. So first change, the core rules. Stratagems have changed a lot. First of all, any rules that modify the cost of a stratagem, otherwise known as vect rules, so basically like the Calidus Assassin, makes a stratagem more expensive once per game. Those rules all changed and get replaced with this. Lord of Deceit. Each time a unit in your opponent's army targets each time your opponent targets a unit from their army with a stratagem, if that unit is within 12 of this model, increase the cost of the stratagem by 1. So that means you can sit on the back end of the table and make Armor of Contempt more expensive, but if you move your Calidus within 12 of the opponent, Armor of Contempt now costs 2. Not once per game, it just happens. It is a static aura that is in effect. My initial reaction to this was negative. I thought vect abilities are now useless, but the more I think about it, I was wrong. This is actually really, really powerful, but it is different. And this means your vect ability carriers want to be proactive. You can set up melee fights in which you prevent your opponent from using counteroffensive or fight on death, any of those two command point stratagems that are really good in a fighting mirror between two close combat units. And if you put a 12-inch aura onto your opponent before you charge them, or in order to protect yourself from getting charged, this makes a huge difference. So this is a really powerful ability, but it will play very differently from what we were used to. Next, stratagems that can be used more than once per phase or per turn. I can summarize this basically. You cannot use the same stratagem twice unless the rule explicitly said you can use a specific stratagem. So for example, a Space Marine captain can use Armor of Contempt for 1 less command point. Instead of 0, it now says -1. So 2 command point stratagems are now 1 instead of 0. So yeah, anyway, so a Space Marine captain can use Armor of Contempt for -1 command point, which is 0, but you cannot use Armor of Contempt again, or you cannot have used Armor of Contempt before that. So the extra, you can use this extra, doesn't work. Chief Librarian Tigorius, on the other hand, says you can use Overwatch for free. And in addition, so that means you can use Overwatch and then you can use Overwatch again with Tigorius units. So that actually works. And this is a massive change for Space Marines because we have a lot of free stratagems access. So on the negative, you can no longer double Armor of Contempt. So you have to pick where to use it carefully. And having it for free isn't the biggest deal anymore, because if you can only use it once, You can also just pay for it and you don't have to bring a captain along. However, there is an important thing that happens here. And that thing is it no longer says battle tactic. It says a stratagem. And they use Overwatch as an example, which is not a battle tactic. So you can now make everything free. So this means Robute Gilliman is in a weird side grady position. You can no longer use 2 command point stratagems for free. You can no longer use the same stratagem twice, but you can now use every stratagem for free. That means if you put a captain into your Terminators, you can use rapid ingress for free. If you use, you can in the Gladius, you can put the reactive move stratagem, squad tactics, where you move d6 inches, or flat 6 in tactical doctrine. You can use that for free if you have a captain, which is this is interesting. This will change a whole lot how we look at these units. I would recommend you no longer take multiple captains ever again. And this also makes units like Flamestorm Aggressors in the Firestorm detachment worse, because you cannot make the 2 command point devastating wound thing free anymore. It now costs 1 if you have a captain, which is a bit... it's still good, but it is worse than it was before. Stratagems that prevent units from being targeted. Basically, if a stratagem says you can't be targeted outside of 12 inches, it now means you can't be targeted outside of 18 inches. This is amazing for Space Marines because we got shut down by these stratagems super hard. Centurions hate this, hate the 12-inch stuff. We don't benefit from those stratagems, so if they get worse, Space Marines get better. This is a big, big win for us. Stratagems that add new units to your army. If a stratagem has the effect of adding a new unit from your army that is identical to a destroyed unit, you can only use the stratagem once per game. This is massive because this nerfs a guard. Imperial Guard bringing back 4 Kazakin units or 5 Scout Sentinels every single time you kill them is this is now gone. They have to pick. Big for us, because we had some issues with the attrition against Guard. So that's the thing. So right here, I will just go over this briefly because none of this is for us. AdMech, I can summarize. AdMech is now doing damage, where before they didn't do damage, but all of their units are more expensive, and we have to see how that works out. Be aware of melee. AdMech melee is now pretty good. Custodes got some massive changes. The character detachment now gets +1 to wound on the +1 to wound on the entire unit, and Shield Host can now pick the 5-up critical hits every single turn instead of once per game. That's massive. That's big. Eldar, no changes. Agents, no changes. Guard. If you play against Guard, keep this in mind. They no longer get lethal hits when they're stationary. They now have the rule, if you shoot with your tanks at other tanks, you get lethal hits. And if you shoot with your infantry at other infantry, you get lethal hits. So Guard can now move, but they need to be visible. So indirect fire no longer gets buffs. No more lethal hits on indirect fire. And you only get the lethal hits against the things corresponding to your keyword. So there are some exceptions. Scout Sentinels are not infantry, but they're still regiment, so it's something. Black Templars, we will get over that later in the Space Marine section. That's fine. Knights can now walk over buildings. Like a big knight can now walk through a building. But if the knight does that, it has to roll a d6, and on a 1, it is battle shocked. So keep that in mind. Big knights can now walk through walls. That's massive. Warp Talons got nerfed in Chaos Space Marines. Demons got a lot better. Essentially, demons now get a lot more 6-inch deep strikes if they are a mono god army. If they only play units from 1 or 2 gods, they can They have more of the 6-inch deep strike stuff, which is interesting. Dark Angels, they just got better. Deathwing Knights do more damage. Their detachment rules get a bit better. That's all the things. Death Guard can only throw a grenade for 0 CP once per battle round, but they can no longer throw more than 1 grenade. So that's something. Dark Eldar, no changes. Grey Knights. Grey Knights can no longer target lone operatives within outside of 12 inches with the mortal wound power from the Librarian. So keep that in mind if you like playing with the Calidus Assassin or the Lone Orb Lieutenant. Very good. And Necrons can no longer use the 3-inch deep strike stratagem on Catan, which is very good, because that means you don't have to bring infiltrators anymore to prevent the Nightbringer from stealing your home objective. That's good. So, Space Marines. Space Marines, we have gotten some nerfs and we got some buffs. So first off, the nerfs. All of the Iron Storm enhancements got worse. The lethal hits aura for Iron Storm, which gave all of your tanks in 3 inches lethal hits, is now a pick 1 vehicle, and that 1 vehicle in the command phase now gets lethal hits. That means you are more encouraged to take a big vehicle like a Repulsor Executioner or an Astreus over a bunch of vehicles like 3 Gladiator Reapers or something. Master of the Machine War is the same thing. You now pick a unit in your command phase, and that unit can advance and shoot or fall back and shoot. That is important because you can no longer fall back into the aura and then shoot. So keep that in mind. This is now a positioning nightmare. Mercy's weakness goes to 2 CP. That means you can no longer spend. You now have to spend twice the command points to get the critical hit 5s on your vehicles. That's big. Iron Storm got a lot worse, and they will get worse when we talk about it later on. Desolators, no changes. Rip in Pepperonis. These guys are done. Impulsor and Repulsor. This is what it also said up here in the Black Templars. Right there. The Impulsor can now carry 7 models, and the Repulsor can now carry 14 models. This is amazing, because it means you can finally put 6 Blade Guard with a character in an Impulsor, and you can finally put 6 Gravis Marines with a character into a Repulsor. You no longer have to pay extra for a Land Raider Redeemer just to get your aggressors with Fire Discipline on the board. The Redeemer is still good. I will talk about it when we get to the points video, but that's massive. That is a really good change. I love this change. Space Wolves. Space Wolves now get actual rules to their detachment, so that's all I will say. If they play it, they will actually use their Space Wolf rules, maybe. Here we go. What do we have here? Thousand Suns. Thousand Suns got worse. The Exalted Sorcerer can't slow down vehicles and monsters. You cannot use Temporal Surge more than once on the same unit, so you can't triple move Magnus 30 inches across the table. The Doombolt can't target Lone Ops outside of 12. So once again, if you like the Lone Orb Lieutenant, this is a good change. And Twist of Fate, instead of removing your armor save, you now get -2 to your save, or a +2 to the AP, whatever you mean. So instead of making a Land Raider have a 0 save, you now have a -2 save. This is much more reasonable, and as a Thousand Suns player myself, this is completely fair. Thousand Suns were too good, and with these changes, they can finally go down in points, and it wouldn't be too bad. Another thing, the army rule, you can only cast 1 ritual per Psyker, which means the enhancement that allows you to use the same ritual twice is a lot worse than before. And you can't just you can't just throw 1 Disc Sorcerer into the enemy and cast 15 of these Cabal rituals. So a big deal. Thousand Suns are an important enemy army because they were really good against Space Marines, and now they're worse, which is good for us. Lastly, Tyranids. Tyranids are pretty good. Shadow in the Warp was buffed. If you're within Synapse, the battle shock is more difficult. +1 strength if you are in Synapse. A bunch of profiles go up. The Tyrannophax is now d6 +6 damage, which is a crazy profile. Instead of 2d6. Exocrine, strength 9. So that's strength 10 in Synapse, and a bunch of units gained the Synapse keyword and some of the detachment keywords. So Tyranids got some buffs, and the reason why is because their objective play got a lot worse, with Spore Mines and Ripper Swarms no longer being able to do actions in the Pariah Nexus pack. So this is the data slate itself. This is only a piece of the puzzle, but I hope I explained what these changes mean for Space Marines in a understandable manner, and I will see you on the next video. Courage and honor.